Hello and welcome to CheersToFearYT, where we take horror films and turn them into drinking games. We're your two hosts. I'm Alex.
And I'm Tucker. Today we will be making a drinking game for Paranormal Activity 3, directed by Joost and Ariel Schulman. These two happen to be a directing duo that have a production company named Super Marsh. The most famous thing that they have made is Catfish, and these two are the people that came up with the term catfish as well. The movie is written by Christopher Landon once again.
Paranormal Activity 3 once again goes into the past. This time it goes into how Katie and Christy were haunted as kids. Their mother Julie and her boyfriend Dennis notice that Christy has made an unusual imaginary friend named Toby. They then soon realize that Toby might be real, and it seems as his intentions are to harm people that get too close to Christy.
We honestly feel that this could be a standalone film, but we do find it better to view the previous movies before watching this one, in our opinion. Regardless, we still have a spoiler warning, as always, just in case that applies for you. If so, we recommend that you use our drinking rules posted on screen now to watch along with the movie and then come back to our video when you're done. With that out of the way, let's move on to our breakdown of the rules.
Well, as always, let's start with the first rule, which is death. This came to a total of 2 sips throughout the movie.
Yeah, same as the second installment. Again, just one more death than the first one. It seems like it's a trend that there's only 1 or 2 deaths in Paranormal Activity movies.
Continuing on, I feel like it's even more of a trend for the second movie because both of these deaths happened at the very end of the movie.
Yeah, that's the other trend that's formed from all these movies, is all the deaths happened at the end.
Yeah, and it was the mom and the dad in the very end of the movie.
Yeah, true. Anyways, moving on to rule number 2, it's whenever somebody screams, cries, or yells, and this happened 15 times in this movie.
He is real. Hey, Christy. Christy's such a baby. Katie, stop it. Well, you're being a baby. Only babies have imaginary friends. Right in there.
Honestly, it's not as much as we expected because they were kids, and as history tends to say, I feel like kids yell a lot in horror movies, or scream or cry, especially babies, but there weren't babies in this movie.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about it when I was watching it. 15's still a decent amount, but yeah, kids do tend to scream a lot more, or throw a fit a lot more, or call for mom or dad, but not in this movie. They're not really calling for help all that often. There's a couple scenes, but for the most part, they're trying to deal with it on their own, it seems.
Yeah. Now let's move on to rule number 3. Whenever you see a jump scare, you take a sip. This came to a total of 15.
I guess the biggest jump scare for this movie is probably when all the furniture is up on the ceiling and then all of a sudden it just all falls down. That's probably the biggest jump scare in the movie, I would say.
Yeah.
Aside from that, there's not a whole lot to say about this rule, so we'll just move on to rule number 4. It's whenever paranormal activity occurs. This happened 16 times.
And we should mention, not all of it is necessarily bad paranormal activity. So one example of this is Christy jumping off the ledge and not being hurt because Toby catches her, it's implied.
Yeah, well, you don't even hear a thud or anything. She doesn't even land on the ground. So that implies that obviously it must have been Toby catching her and setting her down gently, letting her run back up the stairs. Yeah, that's true. It isn't all bad things. Some of it is good or just fun, I guess, in Christy's case in that scene.
Now let's move on to the 5th rule, which is whenever Toby is said, and that is said 19 times throughout the movie.
Yeah, this rule seemed to be swapped out with whenever somebody is talking about the entity haunting them.
Yeah.
Rather now it's just whenever they're talking about Toby, pretty much.
If you saw me talking to somebody, it'll be Toby.
Toby's your friend?
He's my friend.
Yeah, what do you guys talk about?
And I think it's worth mentioning that finally the entity got a name after 2 installments.
Yeah.
Even though this is in the past, it's a little bit confusing. So another rule that is returning is rule number 6. It's whenever a camera is mentioned. There's not much to say for this rule other than it gave us 13 sips this time around.
Sorry. Sorry. You mind if I set up a couple cameras around the house? Oh yeah, I'll take that as a yes. Okay.
And I guess it is worth mentioning how they came across that equipment. It's because Dennis is a wedding photographer or videographer.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a good kind of continuity thing to kind of close that end off, especially since video cameras probably cost an arm and a leg back then in the 80s.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Moving on to rule number 7, which is whenever somebody talks about grandma, you take a sip, which came to a total of 6.
Yeah, and I wish they kind of expanded more on grandma a little bit more. I would have liked to see her a little bit more in the movie, I think.
Yeah.
Considering our count was only 6 times for being talked about, we don't even see her all that much throughout the movie. I think we see her talking about how she doesn't really think Dennis is the right guy for her daughter, I mean. And then she talks about, or in the end is, I guess, when she comes up again when they're going to Grandma's house to be protected. And then we finally see that, you know, she's part of this coven or cult or whatever. Yeah. And that's all we get to know. I don't know. We don't really learn how she got involved with that. And I wish we would have seen that, I guess.
Yeah. Continuing on with that, I feel like they could have expanded more, especially after the second movie. I think there was a scene where Allie was doing research online and saw that it said, they have to give up their firstborn male child in exchange for wealth or power, something like that in the second movie. So I feel like they could have expanded on that point more.
But again, this happened before the second movie got released after. It's a prequel. So the fact that they saw her grandma involved with this should explain in the second one that they already know that it's, you know, cult related in some way. So like the fact that they discover it, I guess, is a little bit of a continuity error. Anyways, let's move on to rule number 8. It's whenever the demon or entity, whatever you want to call it, harms somebody.
Honestly, I'm surprised that it happens so much. Just because in a lot of these movies, the demon typically does nothing. It like bites somebody's leg and that's kind of the end of it. Mm-hmm. But in this movie, breaks Dennis's back, bites Randy on the leg, punches the babysitter in the face or something like that, pulls Katie's hair. Like, he does a lot of things in the movie.
Yeah, it gets a lot more handsy in this one, I guess.
Speaking of Toby, whenever somebody denies his existence, you take a sip, which came to a total of 5.
So, we're not going to Grandma's house, okay? We're not going to Grandma's because there's no Toby, sweetie. There's no Toby, and there's no ghost. Hey, don't run away from me. Hey, there's no ghost. And that's the end of it. I don't want to hear any more of this talk, okay? Okay?
Yeah, and I thought this would have been more, honestly, because like we said in our episode on Paranormal Activity 2, there's always that skeptic in the movie. This one didn't have as strong of a skeptic, I don't think. Like the mom, I guess, she just didn't want to believe it. But aside from that, there wasn't a whole lot of skepticism involved. So that's, I guess, why we didn't see it as much. I just expected more, that's all.
Yeah, that's fair.
Anyways, moving on to the last rule of our drinking game. It's rule number 10. Whenever you see the night number shown, you take a sip. And this happened 8 times in the movie.
Yep, once again, this rule is still here. We're still not sure when it's going to disappear. We're not sure if it's ever going to disappear because we still haven't caught up with the entire franchise yet.
Yeah.
So, honestly, we'll see if it sticks around next movie. But with that being said, that does it for all the rules. So, the totals for the rules come to 105, which is the equivalent of drinking 3.5 standard 12-ounce cans based off our 30 sip per can scale.
Yeah, so the drinking game for this movie wasn't that bad, and it seems like it's like that for all of the Paranormal Activity movies, at least so far. Yep. They're all in that, 100 to 110 range, or somewhere maybe a little bit, give or take +5 or whatever.
Yeah, basically 90 to 120, I think. It's kind of all within that spot. I don't remember, honestly, what the first movie was, but...
Yeah. Anyways, it's pretty much the same formula throughout every movie so far. It shows the night number, and then that's when the drinks start coming. And yeah, there's not much else to say for the drinking game involved. It's pretty much the same thing for every movie so far. So let's move on to the movie itself.
So from what I understand from a lot of people, this is the best installment of the franchise. Would you necessarily agree with that statement?
I don't think I would say that. And, well, again, I haven't seen them all, but I don't know if I would say it's the best installment of the franchise. But again, it's so hard for me to rank these movies with each other. Like, when we do our ranking video, it's going to be so hard for me to come up with my list. But I could see why people like this as their favorite, or why people view this as their favorite Paranormal Activity movie. Just because, like, you get a little bit more backstory from the ghosts and like the children and everybody involved. It even has a name, Toby.
Yeah.
So like it feels like it's easier to relate to them, I guess, in a way.
Yeah. And
so I think that's probably why people might be more into it.
Yeah. I feel like there's also kind of a fine line between is Toby evil, is he not evil? Where he clearly is evil, but you see him also do things like play with the little girl late at night, for example. Like, him and Christy are easily friends.
Yeah.
Considering she wakes up and hangs out with him, like, trusts him enough to jump off a ledge.
Yeah, and then goes and climbs up on the counters and kind of playing with him there too. So yeah, it's an interesting view on the entity, I guess.
So the adults in this movie were a lot more fun, in my opinion. Dennis and Randy felt like improved versions of Mika.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I like Dennis and what was his name? Randy?
Randy.
Yeah, Randy. I like them a lot more than Mika. They just had more characteristics involved, I guess, and especially Randy, he kind of seemed like a jokester type of guy. Like,
Yeah, he's always running late.
Yeah, running late. He just, I don't know. I liked him as a character for sure. Dennis was good too. And they also weren't just trying to antagonize this demon. They were trying to get to the bottom of it and actually figure out what's going on rather than just provoking him.
Yeah, but then again, they can only do so much.
And I think it's worth talking about the kids as well. And I feel like they were believable for the most part, especially Christy. I think Christy was just a more fleshed out character because she was obviously the one interacting with Toby the most. Katie was kind of just on the sidelines. So we didn't get to see as much of Katie. Like, she wasn't bad or anything. It's just she was kind of a side character.
Yeah, she did seem, honestly, like she had some good scenes. So the one that really comes to mind for me was she was playing Bloody Mary with Randy in the bathroom.
Yeah, that's true.
That was probably one of my favorite scenes with both of them. They actually seemed genuinely scared. I feel like it's the kind of the way that somebody would act if they were in the same situation, such as Randy. You're trying to reassure the kid that everything's going to be fine, but even though you know that the situation entirely is just messed up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's a good point. She was in a couple of good scenes for sure that stood out. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, I think Christy was just a superior character, I guess.
Yeah.
And another thing about this movie is it wasn't like the typical 80s nostalgia that's like so in your face and been catching on pretty recently, like Stranger Things, for example.
Yeah.
And like, you could tell, because the movie starts out as like present day, and then it gets into the past where they're kids, and you can tell that the footage looks a little different. It's like they put a filter on it or something to make it look a little old school or whatever, but it's still good quality. Like, obviously it's not necessarily realistic or anything, but it just makes it easier to watch as an audience.
Yeah, just the way that it transitions and makes it look older, but because it went from present to past, it makes it look older, so it kind of gives the audience the fake illusion of that.
Yeah, and apparently the way they did that was by putting a high-definition camera inside a VHS camcorder. So that was pretty interesting to find out, like, just a way to make it look like an older style video, I guess.
And I feel like this is kind of the start of gimmicks for the franchise. So as far as I remember, again, I'm very bad with information as far as from 4 through, I think, 7 goes as far as Paranormal Activity movies. This is the start of gimmicks. So, for example, they had like the camera on like the rotating fan. So I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
And then they do something fucking stupid like Xbox Connect. Like, I don't know how it goes from like, yeah, this is kind of cool to something like that, where it's just like stupid. And I think this 6th one, they have something like a camera that sees ghosts.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. I feel like this one was subtle enough for it to be good and creative, especially from like the time frame.
Exactly.
I feel like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's a good invention.
Yeah.
But we'll see how I actually think of them for the other movies. So what did you think about the movie?
Overall, I thought it was a good movie. It was better than the last one because it tried something a little bit different. It provided more backstory to the characters. Overall, the acting was good, both from the adults and the kids, I would say. I don't know, it did feel like a Paranormal Activity movie still. Like, it didn't change it up that much, but it still tried something a little bit new. So I did appreciate it in that regard, I guess.
Yeah. I feel like it's just nice to see a movie placed in the 80s where they don't try to shove it down your face. Especially like Stranger Things did do it well, but it comes to a point where it's just kind of redundant and the novelty wears off.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of happy they didn't do that. I mean, then again, I don't think it was really a popular thing. So, but yeah, I feel like it worked out all pretty well though.
Yeah. One thing I'll say about the franchise as a whole is I'm not necessarily looking forward to the movies after this one.
I'm not either. I'm pretty sure it all goes downhill from here easily.
Yeah, because I know the first 3 are the ones I've seen the most. I've seen 4, I think only once. So after that, I'm oblivious to what the series has to offer. But I guess we'll see what comes from them. So just like any other Paranormal Activity movie, there's obviously some dumb decisions made, which leads us right to the award ceremony, where we award one not-so-lucky nominee the Darwin Award. This award goes out to the character who made a stupid decision that resulted in them getting killed, somebody else getting killed, or simply resulting in something bad happening that could have easily been avoided. This award can also be given to a character who is just plain dumb. Here are the nominees.
Today's first nominee is Katie for playing Bloody Mary in the mirror. Even I wouldn't do that as a kid.
And the only other nominee we have today is Julie, for not listening to anybody when everybody is saying that they are being haunted.
And the winner is Katie. We hate to make the winner a kid, but honestly, there weren't a whole lot of bad decisions made in this movie.
And with all that being said, we hope you enjoyed our look into Paranormal Activity 3. If you end up playing the game alongside the movie, or if you have any feedback or suggestions, let us know in the comments below. Also let us know in the comments if you think this is the best entry in the franchise or not.
Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on tomorrow's episode, where we are going to be making a drinking game for Paranormal Activity 4. If you want to check out our most recent video on Paranormal Activity 2, click on the box on the top right, or if you want to see a playlist of all the drinking games and horror movies we review, click on the box below it. Thanks for tuning in, and this is us saying,
Cheers to fears.